Thank you very much, and for having me as well. Well, I came into the ministry as the Minister of Environment just over a year ago, and I came at an amazing time because we had just agreed as a global community the Sustainable Development Goals and then the Paris Agreement. So coming in, we were able to take a seat back and face it and say, what do we want to achieve here? How do we change the narrative that Nigeria has had on environment? So very quickly we talked about empowering people, taking climate action for the Paris Agreement, and protecting the environment, understanding that there are many, many facets and complexities to what we are challenged by in Nigeria. So the first really was to really put that policy in place. The second was to identify what were the things that we could move forward with quite quickly. And having visited the country from the south all the way up to the north, from the delta to the gully erosion, to looking at the northeast where the Lake Chad had dried up, it was very clear to us that an entry point would be our NDC from the Paris Agreement, which would help us to prepare a pipeline of projects that could be funded through different innovative ways that the Paris Agreement now had opened up to us. So for us, it has been about looking at the Niger Delta, looking to see how we can action what has been long in the pipeline for the Ogoni cleanup and pollution, but at the same time addressing the gas flaring through collaboration with our Ministry of Petroleum and signing on to having a flare out by 2019. The second has been really looking at desertification in the country. That has really plagued us to the extent that climate change and the nexus between conflict that has exacerbated the northeast where Boko Haram is was another challenge. We are part of the African Great Green Wall, and that's a program that we would like to invest in as well. But we've also seen some of the challenges around the country where we need to look at renewables so that we can reduce the emissions from fossil fuel. And that has been a collaboration with the Ministry of Power and seeing how we can begin to reduce our dependency on fossil fuels and move into solar power, hydro and wind. All of these are parts of responding to the INDC, which, as I said, is an entry point for us, and particularly on taking climate action.
Now, let's focus actually on that last point that you raised there. There is a challenge in Nigeria to reducing carbon emissions. What do you attribute them to?
I think the policy environment has been fragmented, and very often we're siloed into the different sectors. That's just been what we've had to respond to in the development arena. But with sustainable development, the collaboration and coming out of those silos so that the Ministry of Power and Environment and Petroleum are speaking to the issues and looking for the solutions is I think, a big step forward. Clearly, our gas flaring is a major part of the emissions, and that is something, while we have committed year and year again to that flare out, I think now what we have are definitive steps by the petroleum industry to try to do that by 2019. The other has been, the transport sector accounts for quite a lot of our emissions as well. And we're trying to take steps there to address mass transit and to make sure that people have access to it, but at the same time that we're not creating the pollution that is affecting many people's lives. My visit to The Hague has been on two issues, one on planetary and security, but on the other has been about the level of sulfur in our fuel and how we can get to reduce that so that we see both from generators and vehicles less emissions. I think there's never been quite an understanding of all those factors that are involved in the emissions and the harm that they do. Fuel wood is one that we see harming our women and our children in a really big way, and the research behind that is only just recently that one is faced with the statistics, and so you know that you have to do something urgently about that. And we're looking at what is happening in Nigeria, which I would describe as a crisis right now in terms of the logging and the use of fuel wood.
Now, Vice President Al Gore made reference to the fact that there's huge potential in Nigeria as far as solar energy is concerned. In fact, we have seen in recent times great investment from Nigeria in that space, solar energy. What future do you see for clean energy in Nigeria?
Huge future. I mean, we have a country that is underserved by power, and we see that renewable energy, particularly solar power, in greater parts of our country, 2/3 of the land mass, could benefit by that. And while we look to diversify the economy, power is going to become a big question. We've recently, in a collaboration with Morocco, that has succeeded in solar power at scale, and I think that that's something that collaboration is going to benefit Nigeria, seeing that both on and off grid. The Minister of Power recently signed on to just over 13 contracts to bring solar power in, and he's looking at mini grids to first of all benefit a lot of our tertiary institutions. But I see this as importantly trying to get into that value chain where we want to reclaim the desert, and by growing trees, not just ordinary trees, but agroforestry, where there is a value to that tree, and you put it into that value chain, you're going to want to look at power for small and medium industries for our women and young people. So solar power, I think, is definitely the way forward for us. It will be part of the mix. As the Minister of Power looks at his energy mix, we'll be seeing a 30-30-30 distribution of that, and we have begun to pave that way forward, but also to the technologies that are needed. Some of the challenges will be on the pricing, and as to whether we are on or off grid, because the distribution of power is also another challenge for us. But we're working very hard at trying to make sure that we can reach everyone around the country.
And then the move to renewable energy surely will have great benefits for prosperity, particularly economically for all in Nigeria, as well as democratization. We've reflected at the beginning of the hour how scarcity of water as well as desertification of Nigeria is becoming a challenge. Talk to us about how the benefits could see a realization of economic prosperity for people of Nigeria.
Well, as I said, depending on which part of the country you're looking at, and as I say, we are so diversified with our challenges. But if I concentrate just talking about the northeast, where we see a lot of potential for really addressing the day after we end the conflict with Boko Haram, is what livelihoods would we be talking about in a desert area? So the afforestation of that area would be important, and doing that through the Great Green Wall and ensuring that we have renewable energy to support that is going to be important. To jobs that will be there for both women and young people. So that's something that we're trying to work through local governments and state governments, because this is where the sustainability is, building the capacities and the governance that will secure that. But also to encourage the private sector to come in. A lot of these will be small and medium scale industries, and if we are looking at diversifying the economy from its agricultural base, then we're going to want to use water, irrigation, and that's another collaboration with water, the water resources sector, where they have in their priorities resuscitating the river basins that we have across the north of the country. So it is really about trying to bring the different strands together. That we have irrigation for the schemes that we want to reclaim the desert. So we're doing two things, taking climate action, but we're also providing livelihoods for people that will join that value chain that the Minister of Agriculture wants to use. We take advantage of the technologies to make sure that this is climate smart agriculture, that we are making the best use of water, solar power, and trying to ensure that people have jobs.
Minister, help us understand the impact of the climate crisis on women in Nigeria, and more importantly, how women need to be part of the conversation, the dialogue that realizes a solution for the country.
Well, for us, I mean, women carry the burden of climate change, whether it is the scarcity of water and the distances that they have to cover, or in fact the very difficult environment that they eke out a livelihood. More recently, you will see that desertification is just taking up farmland that was available before, and so therefore even the livelihoods are not there for them, and this is a considerable burden on our women. And so they are the first port of call. The discussions that we have with the diversification, speaking to agriculture, and the availability of other services are done with our women in our communities. And I think what is exciting about it today is that more and more young entrepreneurs are coming on, and young women into this discussion, so that you see this partnering in our local communities of young women and those that are older coming together with different ideas on how to recover in what is an incredibly difficult environment. So context does matter. We speak about this in the Niger Delta, where pollution has been a very big issue, and how to get women back in, looking at the skill sets that they would like to have that give them a decent job, and making sure that, you know, power and clean water is available for them. To the north, where, as we said, the challenges of desertification are huge. We've seen that in Lake Chad. I mean, Lake Chad has dried up to about 95% of what it once was, and that's really taken away livelihoods, trade, and it's made it very difficult for us to even talk about recovering from the conflicts that we have. But we're very optimistic. What the climate change Paris Agreement has done for us is bring so many more partners into the arena. And I think that with government, with the private sector, with communities, particularly women, there will be a pathway that we believe we can follow over the next 5 to 10 years that will make a real difference to us achieving our NDC.
And my parting question, Minister, your thoughts and reflections on the Paris Agreement and how it's going to impact on the post-2015 agenda, particularly when it comes to Nigeria.
Well, again, as I said, the two historic things that happened in 2015 was a different way of conceptualizing development, and by speaking to the 17 goals that really respond to a narrative we all agreed, which is that it's not just about health and education, which are incredibly important. It's about our economies, it's about our environment, and those 17 goals respond to it, and each country takes them up as they see their priorities best vested. And so I think that the challenge we have right now is how to align the SDGs with the climate agreement, and I think that's something that UNFCCC have put on their front burner. As we were at COP in Marrakesh, this was one of the issues that came up. How do we, better align and become more fit for purpose at the country level to respond to that? Now, we're hoping that the UN agencies themselves will rise to that occasion and help us with the different parts of it. In Nigeria's case, we do have a vision and a plan which is integrating the SDGs and the climate actions that we need to take. The NDC we have is part of our midterm sector strategies and the budget that we have. But we're also looking for other resources to come in for this. So innovation, the green bonds, the first sovereign green bond that we hope to issue in the first quarter of next year, will help us bring together SDGs and types of responses to a climate challenge that we have. So you'll see the transportation sector and funding for clean transport. You will see solar power, which is all a part of what we need to do to get industry going and to get jobs out to people. So we're very excited that Nigeria is embracing the SDGs, and also we have ratified the climate agreement. And so for us, I think we are now just trying to walk the talk and to put in place the investments that are needed to make this a reality across the country.
And we certainly wish you all the best as you walk the talk. Thank you very much, Minister Mohammed. As Vice President Al Gore said at the beginning of the hour, solutions are at hand. And it's exciting, Vanessa, to hear of all the wonderful initiatives that are taking place in Nigeria right now. And I'm looking forward to finding out more as the years unfold.